So while Madhav gets his coffee, I just wanted to say that I'm truly humbled and very privileged to be among you. The morning has been fabulous, and so much grist for the mill really for me, because I am actually at an interesting point in my career where I am redesigning potentially the rest of my working life at least. So being amongst so many practitioners is really it gives me a lot to think about. So thank you, Anthony. Mine will be somewhat more pedestrian a talk, because as you might have figured out from that very elaborate introduction, I've had a pretty linear career. All of it has been spent as a salaried slave, working mostly in-house of large corporations, all multinationals, and really being an ambassador for those corporations, helping them put their best foot forward. So I've had, unlike many of you here, I am not an entrepreneur. I've had a very linear career, and I've worked in some fairly controversial sectors. Particularly my last 10 years was spent in one of the most controversial sectors there is in the world, which is the Aerospace and Defence sector. So I worked for a British Aerospace and Defence company, and I'm actually going to talk about their approach to design a bit, because I think it's quite interesting how large engineering firms can approach the design world, of which all of you are practitioners in some shape or form. But I'm also going to talk about how do people like me buy design. And at the end of the day, all of us in this room are trying to sell something. Sometimes we sell that thing for free, sometimes we charge for it. But I wanted to kind of reflect my experience on what is it that people like me think about when we are buying design services of any sort, so the entire spectrum. And that's really where my experience and expertise lies. That's where that's how I encountered Anthony and Lopez Design many years ago. And I have learned the method and the madness that goes into commissioning design through my work with people like Anthony. I thought I'd spend some time just talking about that. So at the very highest level, and I think about this quite a bit, because I have a lot of time to think right now, I'm unemployed, and I'm kind of trying to rethink my future a bit. I think design for commissioning agents like me demands a very basic quality, which is honesty. And very often, corporations, like the ones I've worked for, struggle to be honest. And, I think there is no project that I have done through professionals and experts where we have together not struggled with the inherent dishonesty of large successful corporations. And that dishonesty increases as those corporations become more and more successful. So I think that is the first struggle that commissioning agents like me, in-house buyers deal with. And of course there's the entire labyrinth that we deal with. which is more a logistics problem. But I think there is a core honesty that is required when you commission design, and many corporations struggle with that. This, by the way, excludes those corporations whose bottom lines or top lines are based on their ability to appeal to their market through design. So, one of the examples that I gave Anthony that I'm very fond of, and it's a recent example, is, the Saregama Karava or Caravan, whatever pronunciation you want to use. That product is based on its radio-like design. What music it offers is actually quite irrelevant. It's just a cute thing to have in your living room. So we exclude those companies and those products. But some of the corporations I have worked with have not needed to rely on superior design to market themselves. And that's where you have the problem, and the problem of dishonesty. So the first thing that an in-house professional like me has always had to do is to challenge the leader in our leaderships. Our leaders typically, don't like challenge, but they certainly don't like to be told that what they've been doing and how they've been doing it and what they've been selling with great enthusiasm is actually probably not the best. It's not working, or it's, failing, etc., etc. They don't like bad news. And I think the germ of commissioning or putting on the table the need for design as a spectrum comes at that point where somebody has to deliver really bad news to somebody who's really big in the system. So that's sort of my second thread of thought. And very often this leads to people like me, and I'm sure there are some people here who have worked inside of large corporations, where we become very vulnerable because we are challenging our leadership to look at design as something that is a necessity. In fact, even that is, still something that I believe is a developing thought in most corporations. And I wanted to, because many of you run firms of your own, very successful firms, and are very successful professionals that come to pitch to large corporations, mid-sized corporations, and pitch experimental or innovative work. I just wanted to put the spotlight on the vulnerability that many in-house professionals like me, many of the leaders that you are going to appeal to for their commitment, but also their money, feel when we commission design. And it's something that, I was chatting with Anthony about, and I think it's something that we tend sometimes to take lightly. But a lot of us who have been in positions like the ones I've been in, fight very hard and feel very vulnerable when we work to help our employers with design services. So that's something that I thought I should bring up. I think one of the things that many corporate leaders demonstrate when they interact with professionals like us is this concept of design as taste. Very often, and this is really now where this is, in my view, one of the worst kind of sales pitches one needs to make. But very often, we are trying to ask leaders to set aside their personal taste when they look at design as a service. And that's, when it gets really tricky. For instance, I have worked for a CEO who was doing a greenfield development of a building to house about 200-300 people. He had what you would call a sort of superior, he believed he had superior taste, which he then imposed on the entire design of that building. And 300 people had to live with one individual's notion of his having superior taste. That building still exists and the man still lives. Well, bless him. And this is something that was not unique to that individual. It's actually rampant. And I think one of the problems that professionals like Anthony must come across, less and less I'm sure now, is that you are often trying to ask leaders to not be individuals and be more a collective, in some of the, using some of the language that we've used through the morning. And that is very hard work for leaders to do. I think the second challenge that people like me face when we commission design work is that very often we commission design to be a distraction, where we do not acknowledge that there may be another more subterranean problem, and we're looking at a more superficial aesthetic fix. That is again news that people like me find very hard to deliver, that while design can do some things, it can't fix all problems. There is a problem probably in the way you hire your people. There's probably a problem in the way that your dealerships are dealing with people. There's a problem with your product. Design cannot fix that problem, but very often, because it is relatively low-hanging fruit, and there is actually a quite clear outcome of the design process, leaders tend to lean on it as their fix. And I think this is something that you might have encountered in some of the behaviors of people you have marketed your services to. And so, design as something that needs to be honest is hard work. I have just finished a very short but very memorable tenure with another aerospace company, and so we're talking about apples and apples, 8 years with one, a couple of months with another, and I can tell you that there are some companies that will be more amenable to the bad news, that there is something that is broken, that design might be able to help, that there is something that is broken that design cannot help, that there are leaders here who are imposing personal taste, that you are trying to use design as a distraction, but there are other companies that will absolutely reject that counsel. And very often, the person who is trying to deliver that counsel is people like me. So I'm actually, using this 20 minutes to appeal for some amount of empathy from, the design community, but also, there are behaviors that are just human, that we all have, that you and I have had to encounter, will continue to encounter, as we try and see the system with the design thinking and the design education, etc., that some of the speakers this morning have brought up. And I simply, I think, want to say that finding your way through corporations is almost as hard as finding your way through the bureaucracy. And somebody brought that up in the morning. They're not very different. I've worked for deeply dense, blunt-headed, arrogant, and bureaucratic organizations which probably behave very like the government. So if you have experience in breaking that in a corporation, you are probably quite likely to be able to have some success in the government and vice versa. So I'm actually kind of going to keep this quite short and sweet, and I am open for questions and comments.
I was just curious, two things. You mentioned that as corporations, if understood right, that they are inherently dishonest, I suppose, in their dealing with the public, and it increases as they get bigger. If you could just expand on that, number one. Number two, based on your own experience, what are your thoughts on, we made in India, government policies made CSR mandatory for the larger corporations. Now they want to penalize them in very funny way. So all those things which they are planning to do, what's your take on that? Thank you.
So I'll go to your CSR question first. And I have to say I am gobsmacked at the recent move to almost criminalize your inability to fulfill your minimum mandatory requirement. It's just not the right direction to go in. The fact of the matter also is that in the past several years, many corporations had to redesign their entire CSR commitments to align with the government's agenda, which has been around the cleanliness initiative, the Swachh Bharat, and the Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao, save the girl child, educate the girl child, and other such platforms like Make in India, Startup India, Digital India, etc. So this is just not the right direction to go in. The penalty is very large for a corporation to bear. In fact, the minimum mandatory law in itself is a controversial concept because it actually in some ways could trigger dishonesty, which has happened. So I'm not going to go into cases of that, but you can be easily dishonest when it comes to CSR, and there have been ample cases. The other fact is that, and I think Dr. Pandey mentioned that earlier, that philanthropy in areas which are hidden away from public, that can't really be celebrated, that are very niche, is actually quite the true essence of it. And what has happened is that with the law, not the recent penalty, many corporations have actually moved away from areas that they were actually very familiar with. They had some give there. They had more give than they had get. And they have drained those areas and allocated their funding to the more fashionable areas where they feel that they have a higher upside in terms of visibility. So that is not a positive thing to happen. Hopefully the corporations will put up some resistance. I'm not sure if they will. And on the point of dishonesty, and I've written about it recently, so I'm happy to actually go on record to talk about it. An example, I won't elaborate on the abstract, but an example of the dishonesty in the corporate, and it's not necessarily the Indian corporate, although I think the Indian corporate really does a very good job of it. is that for many years, many of us have felt there is a slowdown in the economy. And for many years, in fact every year when the budget comes out, what do you see on your television and what do you see in your pink papers? You see corporate captains celebrating every budget. Every budget is excellent. Every budget is progressive. Every budget is forward-looking. Every budget is going to deliver, the manna from heaven. It is literally in the last few days that if you open up the newspapers, those same corporate captains are now, with their backs to the wall, talking about the fact that there is a real economic slowdown, which is probably an impending crisis, probably going to end in some sort of an implosion. So corporates need to be slightly dishonest. They have to be, because remember, corporations employ people. If you're not able to motivate me when the chips are down, then honestly you're not going to get the best out of me. So there is a level of dishonesty that has to be maintained. And I use the word dishonesty, you might want to use another word. But I think we are seeing literally every morning in our papers and on our television screens in the past few weeks, corporate captains completely changing the tune that they've been dancing on. And for me, that is problematic. So I don't know if I've answered your question.
So you said design cannot solve all the problems?
No.
But,
Can make you feel really good, but can't sort some problems out.
but when you say that, in what context?
So you were saying that design cannot solve all the problems, but there is something called organization design, policy
Yes.
design, or process design. And in that context, a lot of times they are banking on design thinking, which is being sold as a, jargon. I mean, that is what the design community feels, because it's more of a jargon than what designers know upfront about what design process is. But whatever, everything said and done, there is this upselling of design in the corporations, whether they understand it or not, whether it is understood or not. And somehow, as someone who's not very old, neither new in the profession, I feel that maybe the designers lost out on selling design earlier on, because there are a lot of management consultants who have jumped the gun, and they do a great job of selling design, and they do a great job of selling in general. So what is then design doing there, like if design cannot solve problems? Also, the other thing is, design is also seen as design of artifacts, and that approach has veered towards design of the intangibles, design of people problems, wicked problems. All of these things have been dropping in from the West. I mean, largely you don't hear that much in India, but yeah. So in that context, have you not explored that dimension, or is it stemming from some other ground reality that?
So I don't believe that I was referring to the more abstract aspects and actually the lesser known aspects of design to the ones that you're making reference. I also believe that till now, all the organizations that I have encountered have been very well intentioned, but actually have not got there's a good word for it, which I will not use, but they don't have the backbone for actually looking at organization design as you are referring to it. So very often, so corporations struggle to break things down to remake them, which can often be the beginning of the kind of process you're referring to. And in that lies, and I'll come back to my favorite word, some amount of dishonesty, which is healthy. So that's the kind of dishonesty you need to maintain, because there'll be corporations that will realize the need to break so that they can make something. So I was not actually at that end of the abstract. So thank you. I mean, it's really quite wonderful as a thought, but I think we're a way away. One of the areas that I have now quite an abiding interest, for a variety of reasons, is the design of work culture. And what have we done here? We have basically transposed the design of the American work culture into the Indian workplace. And we will have, if we are not having right now, worse problems than the American corporate world. And there's been lots of people who've used the word civilization in the morning's proceedings. And I struggle with that word and its use, because we are not seeing any essence of this, I don't know how many trillions of years of civilization we say we have, in the average Indian workplace. And therefore, I feel challenged when you talk about organization design, because organization design actually precedes or goes along with culture, designing a culture. And where can you design a culture? In a workplace. It should be your first place that you can actually design something, because guess what? We've got a whole bunch of captive people who are going to fall in line. We're trying to design the culture of the country. In fact, there is an imposition now of a certain culture. But you ask anybody who's worked as a minion in a large Indian corporation, and it is it's actually, excuse the language, a bastardized form of the American workplace culture. And, I don't believe that reflects our civilization in quotes. We have an opportunity to do something absolutely wonderful. And in my view, we have missed that opportunity. But I am somewhat pessimistic. So, if you have some optimism, please keep it and transfer some to me. There's somebody behind you as well.
One comment. I think you're absolutely spot on. I find using the same logic trains to deal with mid-rung bureaucracy that I do to deal with mid-rung, corporate mandarins. But hearing you speak, it just occurred to me, and especially since I've also looked at the CSR policy, and like you, I was also gobsmacked. And it then occurred to me hearing you speak, that perhaps are we not treating, and this particular response that you just gave, perhaps is what I'm trying to kind of get a grip on, is that maybe the fundamental mistake we're doing is trying to treat corporate India, and we're actually encouraging corporate India to behave like corporate America in more ways than one. So the CSR penalty is based on the philosophy that the typical Indian corporate leader is trying to ferret away money in disgustingly and criminal quantities when compared to the milieu that they operate in. And I don't think that's the natural tendency of the business owner in India. And therefore, my question to you is that these cycles of first introduction of CSR as an act, imposing that as a part of your economics as a corporation, and then kind of building on that by ratcheting up the penalty aspect of it while not working with policy. I mean, it's like what I mentioned with climate change. For me, that's like, as an architect, that's the most bizarre situation. Like, we go and make commitments at COP Paris, and the very next day we are sanctioning projects that are not in line with that. That's the dishonesty that's actually common to both corporate India and
I mean,
Indian governance.
I'm grateful for you to understand
Yeah,
that
so no,
word,
it's
because
come
it's a
through
hard word
experience.
to use.
Yeah, there are bumps on my head from stone walls that I've smashed my head against to understand this. But here's a thought, that is there a way to try and convince government that they need to take a different track with corporate India vis-a-vis their financial bad behavior, good behavior, what have you, you know? Because I do genuinely think, because we're a large, diverse country, we don't have a type of corporate leader.
Agreed.
And a bulk of a lot of the stuff that happens philanthropically happens very quietly by people who are involved in the most, you know, like guys who make socks, guys who make gutka, guys who make the type of people you don't identify as corporate India. You identify that with Anand Mahindra, but I think Anand Mahindra is a corporate America clone and likes to operate at that scale, you know. So is there a way you think that this can, the Queen Mary can change course?
You know, so I hear you, and I agree with you, and I think there is a tragedy here, but it's a tragedy that's quite, it's watered under the bridge in many ways, because we have made many of these large corporations that have not explored the civilization, and I obviously mean that with a little bit of sarcasm, in their own captive, you know, populations,
right,
or their constituencies. I think that there is an opportunity to shine the government's torch onto the smaller entrepreneurial ecosystem, and to talk about some of the work that small employers do, which should qualify. But I think that's quite hard, because the numbers, the visible large numbers of employment are with the large corporations.
But you know, this economy.
I'm sorry, I just have to say one thing. I think one of the things that we tend now to forget or blindside a bit as we're becoming so American is the kind of nation building that some of the original corporate India did. The Birlas, the Modis. I mean, who hasn't been through that mess of Modi Nagar? You know, the Tatas, for sure. I think those stories haven't been told enough. And I think those stories are being actively forgotten. Because we are trying to be the new America. We don't need to. I am somewhat controversial also in my belief, and you know, Anthony and I talked about it not too long ago, that actually what should be expected of a profit-making enterprise? That it is able to employ people in safe environments which make them productive, that keep them healthy, that take care of families, that take care of healthcare. The more such people that a profit-making enterprise employs, the more philanthropy it's doing. I mean, every business in that, every employer in that sense is already a philanthropist. Now you can penalize the larger enterprises if they are not performing well on employment. And you know, again, a very controversial statement which is not backed by data, but you know, could we investigate whether the really large corporations are actually employing as many people as they ought to? Or they're getting people to do 2 days work.
Yeah, so this is exactly it. I actually truly
So,
believe
well,
that.
I don't know the data.
Look, my gut feeling tells me that's exactly right. But here's the way I've been thinking about it, is that because we are facing a huge employment crisis right now, the government's decided to kind of start talking about MSMEs,
Yes.
right? Medium and small scale
Yes.
enterprises. And there's a lot of startup incubation type noises that they're making. And a large bulk of that sort of employment dips very deeply into the informal sector, right? And seasonal employment. And therefore, if there is a benign form of CSR required, right, and a more honest form of
It's
CSR,
wages.
and perhaps even a more experiential form
It's
of
wages.
CSR, is there not a way to get the Ministry of, the departments who are kind of pushing MSME down, not our throats, but probably a little too late, to kind of...
I think that there must be a way, and I think it's a fantastic point that you're making. For me, wages, good wages,
That's CSR.
is, well, CSR.
Yeah.
So for me, it's really boiling down to that. But maybe we've come too far. Maybe we have. So that's the other problem that I think designers face: the labeling of everything.
Yeah.
And we have over-labeled everything. So one box keeps Startup India, another keeps Digital India, one keeps Make in India. Then within Make in India, there's Make in India in Defence, there's Make in India this, there's Make in India that. It's basically, you've created an architecture, excuse the use of that word loosely, which now you can't even extricate yourself from. How can you go back on all of this labeling?
There's no Shut Up India.
No. Okay. Oh my God, I am going to use that.
For me, a lot of bread butter coming out of CSR so far. I have a very personal
interest in CSR, obviously, but I genuinely feel that CSR is a completely bad idea all the way, and it can encourage nothing but corruption, and I'll explain why. If you look at the corporate, thing is this, that a guy who's making cars, and he's maybe not that good at doing that either in an environment like India, because government keeps coming up with some new rule. Tomorrow they'll say, okay, half your directors have to be women or whatever, but you have to do this or that.
I
And
think
so
that is
that is
already
itself, it's trying to, I'm not being any sexist or anything, I'm simply pointing out that with all our larger social issues and our inability as a country or our state, the government, regardless of the party, to address any of these in a very, very tangible manner, creates this whole situation where we have got simply into virtue signaling, that yes, we are alive to the gender issue, yes, we are alive to the Dalit problem, yes, we are alive to the environment, yes, we are alive to grassroots this thing, and government cannot do that. They've been doing it for last 75 years now, and they expect the car guy to figure out how to do this stuff in the village to run. Our schools are run badly for other reasons. So no matter who puts in money, whether you put your personal money, I put my money, or some company does, it is not going to help, Like I've done stuff with a lot of these hydrocarbon companies who have serious money they are making, and typically they're working in the most backward regions of the country. That's just how it is. And you've got one company who was working in Badmer, and if they actually put all their money, that money was more money than all the central government and state government's money in that district. So what are you trying to do there? Second thing, you expect that
well, you're also displacing the government, which is never a good idea.
You're distorting the...
Because you'll up and leave once
and
your program is over.
participation is totally bottom line driven.
Yeah.
So, where it goes, we do not know. B, if you have an expert, so-called government of India or government of Rajasthan or whichever it may be, who's been in the process of educating or making wells or whatever for last so many years, suddenly you expect overnight this company to have a way to deal with this or to know more than what WHO knows about immunization there, or which is the most stupid thing possible. So that is the first challenge. Second, which you mentioned a little bit about the culture, this whole idea of importing stuff. The thing is that this whole CSR thing, yes, monitoring is better there, but monitoring is better overseas in the Western countries for everything,
Yes.
whether it is here. And they do not have this imposition. This is a totally socialistic, totalitarian idea we have in India, regardless of the party in power. We keep saying right wing and this and that, but actually all of them are bad left wing, that is what we have, and all of them, they keep doing the same tricks, whatever they can push, that okay, today this, tomorrow that. On the ground, it makes no difference at all.
I have to say that there is design thinking. There is design thinking that can go into making charitable grants or philanthropy or the CSR rupee go a longer way than it would normally. I'm pretty sure of that, but I mean, I hear you on the sort of impact.
You see, because the larger principle at play, if you look at this whole business of CSR overseas also, what has happened is that more and more in the Western world, which is more organized and transparent, blah, 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 the common perception of corporations, they become like the 21st century version of the 15th century European robber barons. And they are simply trying to deflect, because they are still stealing. You have the Enrons of the world and all of that. And that has been the larger issue. And if you start analyzing all the big ticket organizations, India, I'll give you an example. For instance, this whole gender feticide that you have, Ford Foundation is one who has pushed this thing, if you go back in time. Number two, this whole water sustainability issue. Again, I think Rockefeller and bunch of them just destroyed this across Rajasthan, sustainable way of harnessing water. Okay, the biggest drug money laundering in the world has been HSBC, this organization. If any of you Google HSBC plus money laundering, you'll find they come up. They are going to investigate it and punish, but UK government intervened. They said this is one of our biggest banks, so let them go, otherwise our financial system will collapse and everyone else will get affected. So that has been the story with all these big ticket organizations. So that is how it is. So in India, when we say that this slimy corporation is doing this as a branded activism, it's rubbish.
I have to say that at no point am I suggesting that the corporation does not or should not participate in development. And therefore, the points you're making are very valid, and I know some of these case studies, but at no point am I saying that corporations should be in the business of profiteering only. But I think I'm taking a slightly more nuanced approach, probably actually more the need of the times. There's millions and millions of dollars that are going into CSR right now. Could they be channeled entirely in a time where we really need to get 20 million, mostly boys, every month out of unemployment? Could that be temporarily the single mission that the government and the corporate commits to? That's kind of the argument I'm making. And that will go against the grain of some of the stuff we talked about earlier, but I dread to think of 20 million young boys, typically, hungry and angry, roaming the streets of our cities because they are unemployed or underemployed. So, these are just we're having a discussion, but I think there is some merit in looking at CSR in a slightly more nuanced way, but also in a way that addresses the here and now of our reality.
Our reality only to the extent of that in my opinion, a corporation, whatever it may be working on, provided it's working in a clean and transparent manner, whatever services it's trying to provide, whatever it's trying to produce, that whole economic activity it is doing and it's fulfilling its tax or whatever obligations in that manner, in a normal sort of situation, that would be enough in itself.
Yeah, except that if you remember the chart that I think you showed, our reality is we've got 1.3 billion people growing to 1.5 billion people, did you say, by 2030?
Yeah.
That is actually the reality, the one reality that will cascade into innumerable other harsher realities, including, for instance, issues with all kinds of pollution. So I'm just simply saying then maybe we should take a more sophisticated view of the commitments that companies are making to doing good, which I actually believe also as another sort of submission, that many companies actually do want to participate in progressing the country or their district or their city or their location of work or their factory district further. So, while I did talk on one hand of dishonesty, there are many companies, in fact I would say most, want to play a role, and I think there is some thinking that should be done on, what could be that meaningful. In fact, when you were speaking this morning, I worried and wondered as to how much corporate money, your clean air activism gets. Probably very little. Very little. Clean Ganga gets a lot. And I worried about it. So obviously your talk was deeply distressing for me.
So I was, hopefully I can speak. As part of a struggling NGO now, Frontlines, two things. We are trying to come up with a strategy for getting the real funding that we need now. We're trying to develop a track record. We're trying to develop a strong backbone of monitoring and evaluation to establish that track record so we can attract the money that we feel will take us to a level of expanding what we think works. We first have to prove it though. And where that thinking comes from is the background we bring from our past lives. I think most NGOs, and I've worked with them in even my training years in healthcare and public health, most Indian NGOs really do not have that as part of their organizational thinking, that we have to establish a proof of principle of what we do.
Totally.
And my experience from that as a public health scholar and academic in my first round, and then I'll talk to you about my managerial background in this, is you cannot define it in those Western academic terms of monitoring and evaluation. You have to look at your implementer and you have to look them in the eye and you have to say, what are you going to be able to show me makes this work? What is success to you? And you have to define your indicators and your measures and your operational approach to that in those terms and in that way of thinking. And it is entirely doable.
Oh,
I can
absolutely.
tell you story after story,
It's entirely doable.
frontline story after story.
It is design
after story
thinking
where it works.
at the end of the day.
And I'm doing this as a public health person.
Yeah.
I'm not doing this as a design.
No,
anything,
but the
right?
thinking.
It's the thinking.
Yeah.
And the imparting of that thinking to the people that you work with.
Yeah.
So I entirely believe that it's the NGO's responsibility as well to build that into their system. Now, how we build that capacity for that to happen, that's the big ticket question.
In fact, then I would say is where the corporation, with all of its managerial capacity, can help not-for-profits to learn how to be more performance-oriented.
And that brings me to my next and last story. I agree with you if the corporation has a culture and an intention that allows that to foster in the people they're trying to benefit.
Yeah.
So in one of my professional hats here in India, at the time I was here, I was the liaison between my university in the US and a big corporate IT giant in this country to start a line of primary healthcare clinics. And my role was a medical director, and I was to bring in the American standards of primary health care to a new primary care startup and start in Delhi NCR, launch a line of clinics and get it up and running. Writing protocols, training the doctor teams, the clinic teams, looking at operations, you name it, we were doing it. We walk into the first clinic that had been kind of built for us. And the first thing I noticed with my doctor hat on, and I had a friend of mine who was actually helping me with some of the training program at the time, is the examination table was positioned wrong to actually do the patient examination. It's a kind of a simple point, but you're just looking at this room and you're saying, well, we can't, a doctor can't do what they have to do when the bed is positioned this way. You've got to actually get a new bed. You've got to order new furniture for this whole place. Let me just tell you that to work in a corporate structure with the established bureaucracy and the established culture, to get that change, to convince people that your end user, whether it was your doctor that is implementing the task at hand or the patient who's your customer coming in, will not be able to function in this environment. That was its own journey. And I think it's a reflection of that corporate culture and that intention.
Yeah.
In terms of what are they actually trying to do here. They were actually trying to make a profitable business model out of this. And yet, to get that communication across to them with no other agenda other than to say it's for patient care.
Yeah. So I'll give you a very small example, you might relate to it. So in one of my previous roles, my employer supported the education of girl children. Early days, I asked the not-for-profit to ensure that at all times we knew there was a numbered number of girls that we were going to be able to support as part of the agreement we signed. So I said at any point in time, you need to know who are these girls by name, grade, age. And a small request like this threw them off, because guess what? What they hadn't thought about, and I will not name the not-for-profit, is they hadn't thought about, or they didn't want me to think about it, is the churning that goes on. So, children of migrant populations enroll themselves in school. We supported the education of those girls. And every few months, some of those girls would leave for the village because somebody fell sick or whatever, and new girls were boarded onto that roll call. So, as a funding corporation, I could have been very happy saying that we fund the education of X number of girls. And I could have just been blind to the fact that actually we were not retaining the girls in the education system, and that we were losing them in this process, and that we needed to be very mindful that we were losing them. We also needed to make whatever efforts we could to try and persuade their families to allow them to continue their education wherever they went. So it was quite a exceptional request that I had made, and I had to fight very hard for them to maintain that list. I didn't want it, but I wanted to know for sure that I was not just churning my money through a set of girls. So, Indu joins in April, but there's, Sujata, who has replaced Indu midway. Indu's dropped out. So where does the dropout get reflected? And, to your point, all of this is design thinking. It's very hard.
I'm going to add a point here.
Sure.
This could be very cultural.
So even within the design community, I've seen this, but generally as Indians, we're great with talking.
Yeah.
We love talking. But the moment you say, come document whatever you're talking about, and then we're like, not now, not then, not later, and that's how things pass. So documentation is something that's inherently not there in our culture, which is very, very meticulous, very British and foreign for us, but it's very prevalent anywhere else in Europe and the West. But I'm sure there are similar cultures like India where people love talking and they're poor with documentation, and that's the brunt of it all, that because there's lack of documentation, there's a problem in the monitoring, there's problem in evaluations, and it's immaterial whatever metrics you have.
Asking for robust performance measurement, monitoring, reporting is not challenging your honesty as a not-for-profit. So I think that's something that not-for-profits need to kind of get used to. So corporations are not challenging their honesty or authenticity. We are simply, very often, trying to ensure that we preserve and we increase the funding. I have waged many a battle, and those battles have been very pleasant battles, but I've had my employer backing me up fully. I've just been lucky that way. Where if I have been able to stack a set of robust outcomes and impacts of the money that we've put behind a good cause, more money is available.
Just a quick response. India's public health data collection infrastructure is amongst the most astounding in scale in the world. Right? If you go into rural India, the public health sector trains up the ASHA workers and the Anganwadi workers, in fact, to collect ledgers and ledgers and ledgers of data on every single resident in rural India that they reach through the public healthcare system. And there's gobs of data. It's amazing stuff. It actually gets collected at the district level in the more put together states, and it's actually compiled and it sits there. And if you're lucky to be part of the government health infrastructure, you could actually get access to it and analyze it and report on it and use it to influence health policy and change. Maharashtra is one of the best examples of that, and I saw it firsthand from ground up how it works, and it's there. And so I feel that we actually have the capacity to monitor and evaluate. We just need to drive the process through. And it is so, in fact, easy to train up people to collect what you need on their terms if it makes sense to them. That's my experience. That if you define for people, why is it important to know this? They'll actually value it, and then they'll take it forward. And obviously not make it too intensive. Now with technology, we have mobile health, for example. I did a project in Jodhpur where we actually did door-to-door risk monitoring for diabetes in Jodhpur. And we built an app on a mobile phone platform, really simple smartphone app, and we collected the data on everything that would, by evidence, give you the risk factor profile for diabetes. So it was like an early screening, household level tool. It's doable. How that translates into what we do in this type of community and how we reach out with the money and the resources that are available in corporate India to actually bear on this is really, I think, a huge opportunity and something to consider. It can be done. I also just want to caution against putting the onus on corporate India to run this whole thing. I want to also make mention, we all know this, there is so much corruption in the Indian not-for-profit foundation scheme. A lot of it has come up in recent years too. A lot of that money goes into overhead. It doesn't go into the direct costs of running programs, and people suffer for it. So I guess my question is on this front, what are the systems that could be in place to actually run this for corporate India? Is there a way to take that burden off corporate India and say, okay, we'll hold your money accountable, we'll hold your donations accountable, but we'll also interface between yourselves and the implementers of the causes that you want to support?
So that model has is now a fairly mature model. United Way, for instance, does that. They run a sort of escrow account for corporations where they do charge you a static fee, a management fee for doing all of the work that you were suggesting. There's online monitoring that funding organizations can access. There are several of these models. They're very successful. I'm of the view that mid-size or smaller corporations, if they are committing funds to CSR, which mid-size ones have to, the smaller ones don't, but if they're committing funds to CSR, my view is that they should be encouraged to not use intermediaries. They should work with grassroots organizations in the area of their choice to deliver change. Large corporations, by virtue of the fact that many of them, their minimum mandatories are large corporate, sums are of large, can be a large corporation in themselves, could use large funding organizations to channel the funding. But I would always suggest that mid-sized corporations and small corporations, small companies, really get their hands dirty in the community. And make it a more tactile experience than one which is, checkbook philanthropy. That's my view, very personal view.